If you've been following the news here in Canada, you've probably heard a lot about gun control. It seems like it's always a hot topic, especially around election time. The government in Ottawa has a plan, and they say it's all about making our communities safer. This plan basically has two big parts. The first part is all about putting more rules on people who own guns legally, right here in Canada. These are folks who have gone through all the proper channels, taken safety courses, and passed background checks. They are your neighbors, co-workers, and family members who enjoy hunting or sport shooting as a hobby. The government believes that by making it harder for them to own certain types of firearms, we will all be safer from gun violence. The second part of the government's plan is about stopping illegal guns from getting into the country in the first place. This is a very different problem. These guns aren't being bought at a local Canadian tire, they are being smuggled across our long border with the United States. Criminal gangs and organized crime groups use these illegal firearms to do their dirty work. So, on one hand, the government is creating new laws for licensed Canadians. On the other hand, they are also trying to beef up security at the border to catch the smugglers. It's a two-pronged strategy, as they call it, but many of us are starting to wonder if both prongs are getting the same amount of attention, and if they're even pointed in the right direction. This approach has created a lot of debate across the country, from kitchen tables in Newfoundland to ranches in Alberta. People are asking some tough questions. Why are we spending so much time and money focusing on the people who already follow the rules? Are my grandpa's old hunting rifles really the problem? Or is the real danger coming from the steady stream of illegal weapons that criminals are bringing in from the United States? It feels like we are having two separate conversations at the same time, and many law-abiding gun owners feel like they are being unfairly caught in the middle of a political game that doesn't really address the root causes of crime. The government tells us that both are important. They say we need to control the guns already here while also stopping new ones from coming in. It sounds logical enough on the surface, but when you dig a little deeper, you start to see some major cracks in the argument. Many people, including some police officers and crime experts, are saying that the focus is all wrong. They believe that if you really want to stop gun crime, you need to put all your effort into stopping the illegal smuggling. Instead, it feels like a lot of energy is being directed at creating more paperwork and restrictions for people who were never the problem to begin with. So, let's talk about what these new rules for legal gun owners actually look like. First, the government announced a ban on what they call assault-style firearms. This term itself is confusing because it's not a legal definition. It's more of a political one. It covers a long list of different rifles and shotguns that were previously perfectly legal to own and use for sport shooting or collecting. If you owned one of these firearms before the ban, you are now in a strange legal limbo. The government has promised a buyback program to compensate owners, but it's been years in the making, and nobody seems to know how much it will cost or when it will actually happen. Next, they brought in a national handgun freeze. This means you can no longer buy, sell, or even inherit a handgun in Canada. If you're a competitive sports shooter, this is a huge blow. How can your sport grow if new people can't get the equipment they need to participate? Imagine if the government decided to freeze the sale of hockey sticks to stop fights. It also creates heartbreaking situations for families. A person who legally owned a handgun for decades can't even pass it down to their licensed, responsible son or daughter. It effectively means that the legal hobby of handgun shooting will slowly die out in Canada. On top of the bans and the freeze, the government has also made the licensing process even stricter. They have introduced new rules that can get your license taken away if you're involved in any kind of domestic dispute, which sounds reasonable on the surface, but critics worry about how these rules will be applied and whether they could be used unfairly. They've also increased the penalties for things like firearms trafficking, which everyone agrees is a good thing. The problem is that these new penalties are mixed in with all the other rules that target legal owners, making it feel like one big package aimed at punishing the wrong group of people. When you add it all up, the ban, the buyback, the freeze, the new licensing rules, it's a lot for law-abiding citizens to deal with. These are people who have proven they are responsible. They have taken safety courses, passed police checks, and safely stored their firearms according to the law for years. Now, they are being told that the things they legally own are a threat to public safety. There is very little evidence to suggest that these measures will actually reduce crime because criminals don't follow these rules anyway. They don't apply for licenses, and they they certainly don't worry about a handgun freeze. Now let's shift our focus to the other side of the government's strategy, stopping the flow of illegal guns from the United States. This is where most experts, and frankly most Canadians with a bit of common sense, believe the real problem lies. We share the longest undefended border in the world with a country that has very different gun laws than we do. It's no secret that it's much easier to get a hold of firearms south of the border. Criminal organizations know this, and they have built sophisticated networks to smuggle guns into Canada to be used in drug trafficking and gang violence. The numbers don't lie. When police forces in our big cities like Toronto trace the guns they seize from criminals, the results are always the same. A huge majority of them, sometimes as high as 85% or more, come directly from the United States. These are not guns that were bought legally in Canada and then stolen. They are handguns and other weapons that were purchased in the United States and then smuggled across the border in the trunks of cars, in transport trucks, or through other hidden means. This is the source of the guns that are actually being used to commit crimes on our streets. The government says it is taking this seriously. They talk about working with American law enforcement agencies through a special cross-border task force. They've also invested money in new technology for our border agents like X-ray scanners and more detector dog teams. These are positive steps and nobody would argue against them. We absolutely need to give our Canada Border Services Agency and the RCMP the tools they need to do their jobs. More cooperation with American authorities to track down smugglers and straw purchasers, people who buy guns legally for criminals, is essential. However, many people feel that these efforts are just not enough, especially when you compare them to the massive focus on legal Canadian gun owners. It feels like we are putting a small bandage on a gushing wound. If the vast majority of crime guns are coming from another country, shouldn't that be our #1 priority? Shouldn't we be putting almost all of our resources into sealing the border to these illegal weapons? Instead, it often seems like the efforts to stop smuggling are mentioned as an afterthought, while the big, flashy headlines are all about the new bans and restrictions being placed on Canadian citizens. A question worth asking. When you look at everything together, a big question starts to form in your mind. Is this whole gun control strategy really about making us safer, or is it more about politics? Many critics argue that the government's actions are driven by ideology, not by evidence. Banning certain types of guns and freezing handguns makes for good headlines and scores political points with voters in big cities who may not understand the difference between a legal gun owner and a violent criminal. It's an easy way for politicians to look like they are being tough on crime, even if the measures they are taking don't actually address the root of the problem. The frustration for many gun owners is that there is very little proof that these policies work. We have had strict gun laws in Canada for decades, yet gun crime, particularly gang-related violence involving smuggled handguns, continues to be a serious issue. Blaming a farmer in Saskatchewan or a sports shooter in Nova Scotia for a gang shooting in Vancouver just doesn't make sense. It feels like a classic case of the government punishing the people who are easiest to control, rather than tackling the much harder and more complex problem of cross-border criminal activity. It's easier to create a new regulation for a licensed gun owner than it is to stop a smuggler in the middle of the night. This approach also comes with a massive price tag. The planned buyback program for the banned firearms is estimated to cost taxpayers billions of dollars. That is a lot of money that could be spent on other things. Think about how many more border guards, police officers, and crime prevention programs that money could fund. Many Canadians are asking if spending billions to buy back legally owned property is the most effective use of our resources to fight crime. Wouldn't that money be better spent on targeting the gangs and smugglers who are actually causing the violence? At the end of the day, every Canadian wants to live in a safe country. We all want to see less gun violence. But we need to have an honest conversation about the best way to achieve that goal. We need policies that are based on solid facts and evidence, not on political talking points. Targeting law-abiding citizens while the real problem of illegal smuggling continues feels like a step in the wrong direction. What do you think? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, follow, and share this to keep the conversation going.